Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation, Customer Communications in the Age of Coronavirus. I'm Kristen, and I'm on the marketing team here at Movable Link, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today. We know that this is a hectic time for everyone, so we just wanted to give you an extra thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. We have a lot to cover today, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison Linland, our SVP of Client Strategy here at Movable Link, to review our agenda for today.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So first, we're going to do a quick intro to our presenters and a little bit about the Client Strategy team. Then we're going to cut right into current state of affairs and general best practices in times like this. And then we're going to delve in vertical by vertical with each of the client strategists taking on their own disciplines. We're going to wrap up at the end with some key takeaways. And most importantly, we're going to try and leave some time for Q&A. So first and foremost, I did just want to kind of dive into introductions to our team, but actually maybe I will preempt myself and just address the elephant in the virtual living room here. We are all working from home today as we prepare to move Link to a virtual organization to protect the health and well-being of our employees. Julio actually lives a block from the office, so he's in, but as of Monday, Movable Link will be virtual for the duration, as are many of our clients. We're being really proactive internally about cameras on, so we thought it would be just strange of us to not have our cameras on during this call. I have to apologize in advance if a grumpy child walks into the frame or if you hear my husband singing in the background. This webinar is about how our clients are responding in strange times, so if nothing else, it will be a reminder of these very strange times that we're in. But I did want to actually introduce our team, the Client Strategy Organization. And I think in telling the story of the team, I have to give a little bit of backstory. So in addition to being the SVP of Strategy, I've actually had the pleasure of having a variety of roles at Movable Link. I'm one of the earliest employees. I joined 8 years ago, and I served most of my time on the client experience team, working across clients in almost every vertical. And our client experience team, as obviously you all know as clients, is just really phenomenal. We hire mostly former clients and partners, usually at ESPs or agencies, who themselves have really terrific insights on not just how to use Movable Link technology, but the nuance of our clients' businesses and how emails drive them. And so they can really drive strategies that make a real impact. So as we expanded the organization and moved to over 100 people, I knew that I really wanted to double down on this practice of knowing and living and breathing our clients' businesses. So in 2018, we hired our first client strategy director, Julio Lopez, to establish the practice and in particular own retail. And shortly thereafter, we hired Katie White, who was our phenomenal client at Hotel Tonight. Many of you probably heard her speak at Think Summit, and she started the travel practice. And together we created a framework for how we could lead engagements with some of our top clients to really drive impactful change quickly using Movable Link technology. And equally importantly, how we could continue to live and breathe the lives and the issues and the opportunities for our marketers within Movable Link and represent the client mindset to all of our internal stakeholders, including obviously the entire client experience organization, product, marketing, and sales. And the things that we do include in-depth enablement that we do every quarter. Actually, Julio just led his Q1 retail session just minutes before this call, which is just packed full of really insightful, actionable opportunities for our clients to use Movable Link technology against the issues for their industry and their clients, and their campaigns. So happily, 2 years in, we've expanded the team significantly. We added financial services and media and tech, and now we have EMEA coverage. And I'll let this esteemed group introduce themselves directly, but basically you can think of us as the physical representation of you, our clients. And as soon as the news flow around coronavirus hit, we began to mobilize internally to talk to our clients directly about what they're seeing, to create recommendations and playbooks for CX to distribute. And then we've been joining a lot of weekly meetings, the weekly status meetings, or a couple of QBRs that were happening. And we just got so many requests that we were like, let's just do this as a webinar so that we could touch more clients. So with that, I'm going to pause and hand it over to the team to introduce themselves. Jackie, you want to get started?
Yes. Hey, everyone. This is Jackie Mattia. I'm one of Movable's Associate Directors of Strategy, and I specifically cover our financial services vertical. I joined Movable from Citigroup this past year, where I worked in their digital marketing organization, specifically on their credit cards. Before that, for years, I worked with the ESPs, Experian and Cheetah Digital, where I focused on working with clients in the financial services space, as well as retailers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elle Cross. I'm Associate Director of Client Strategy, also for financial services. So thank you, Jackie. I joined Movable Inc. also from Citi. So you'll see where that comes in for the two of us. And I focused on digital marketing and servicing communications, actually also including crisis communication and planning. So the discussion today is very near and dear to my heart. In addition to my financial services background, I have worked in the travel space at TravelClick, which is a SaaS-based travel technology company where I work closely with large and small hotel OTAs and travel agents. So as Allison mentioned, Katie White does lead our travel and hospitality space. While she's out on maternity leave, I am helping to cover that vertical. So I'll be talking about travel and hospitality today. I also started my career in public relations and social media marketing, where crisis planning was key. So while I'm not excited that we're having this webinar today and the situation that we're in, I do hope that it's informational and helpful for all of you as we go through this time together. I'll hand it over to Naveen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naveen Wall. I'm the Associate Director of Client Strategy for our Media and Technology vertical. Just like my colleagues here, I was a former client of Movable Inc. I previously came from SiriusXM, where I managed their primary engagement newsletter that went out to subscribers that was personalized based on a user's listening preference. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time in the subscription space. So I spent a lot of time working on subscriber life cycles and actually started my career back out on ESP side, which was where I was first introduced to Movable Inc. Back when I worked on the British Airways account.
Awesome. And my name is Julio Lopez, and I'm the Associate Director of Retail Strategy here at Movable Inc. As Allison mentioned, I am also the founding member of the Client Strategy team after working on retail strategy in the US and in Europe. And after some time abroad, Movable Inc.'s new Client Strategy team felt like a natural transition, and I have been here for the last 2 years.
Great. So we'll kick it off just diving into sort of the current state of affairs as we're seeing things. We recently sent out a survey to many of you asking what your key concerns during the current time are and what topics you specifically wanted insight on. So first off, thank you all so very much for all of your feedback, and we've really tailored today's content based on your responses. Of those surveyed, the majority of clients were from the travel vertical, followed by retail, then healthcare, and media, entertainment, publishing. And the top five challenges that you all noted to your businesses were reduced demand, general uncertainty internally, the need to redo marketing, impact to specific regions and markets, and lastly, workforce disruption. The top five areas that respondents noted they needed support on were the development of tactful messaging, last-minute changes to messaging, personalization based on things like location, workflow efficiency, and planning for future messaging given the number of unknowns. So again, we really tried to focus content specifically on addressing these topics. And with that, I'll hand it over to Elle.
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I do have some very specific experience in crisis and critical message planning. In most organizations that I've been at, we do make sure that we have steps and protocols in place for situations that may arise. Communicating with customers quickly is important, but being prepared and thinking through what those messages should be is really key. So we did want to talk about 5 key elements we recommend thinking about as you're thinking about your organization's communications. So the first one, I don't think it's surprising to anyone, should be the customer is number one. It's difficult for all of us in times of crisis because we're splitting ourselves between what's happening in our personal lives if we're in an impacted area, as well as our organization's position and what's happening with our organization. So when you're thinking about your messaging from your company, really put yourself in the place of the client. Think about what's going on in their lives and ensure that your message is something that's helpful and is appropriate for what's happening to them. The second thing is developing a plan for continuous updates. So even in the survey, we heard things are changing so rapidly, and they always do often with crises, but in this situation, even more so as the virus continues to spread. So anytime something like this happens, you need to have more than just one message as things grow, hopefully as they stop growing and eventually shrink. So making sure that you're thinking about what is relevant and accurate at the time of send is really important. And thinking through what your messages will be in the future, depending on where things go, is very important. One way you can do that is through a dedicated web page. So it can be through email communications. But if you feel like you're going to have more consistent updates that you want to make sure somebody can always go check, a dedicated web page is very helpful. And we'll show you some examples of that later on. The third is to look at your existing marketing calendar and audit and automate as needed. So we have seen some organizations post things that might not be as relevant already. I won't name any names, but we did see a South by Southwest post, for example, about where to eat while you're in Austin after the event had been canceled. So just making sure that you're really looking at what's happening for anything that impacts your market and updating as needed, whether that's changing the content or removing that specific campaign. Aligned with number one is how you can help. So if your organization is helping with whether it's charities or if you're a hotel and you have people staying with you longer term because they can't get home, or if you want to allow your customers to donate with their points or anything like that, this is a really good time to showcase how you're helping or how they can help. This also goes for how you're helping your employees. So if you are doing things like paid sick leave, making sure that you have cleaning protocols in place, it's not a bad thing to communicate these because it will highly impact the loyalty and sentiment towards your organization in the future. And then finally, when things settle down, you may want to think about how you can prepare for any other crises or critical messages down the road so that you don't feel like you're in this panic if it happens again. We do recommend these 5 scenarios as a start of something we want to do, but having a prepared approach if anything was to happen will benefit you and your organization during high stress situations. And then finally, our team is here for you all, for our clients, whether you want to understand more about what we're seeing in the market after this webinar, how you can leverage your existing communications that you have with Movable Ink, how you communicate with your customers, or if you just want us to join brainstorms about your marketing calendar and what you want to do in the future, we are here for you. And we want to make sure that you reach out to us if you do have any of those needs. So I will now hand it over to Julio.
One of the things that I'm realizing about working remotely or not working in the same room is the mute and unmute. So sorry for the delay there. So in this slide, what I wanted to highlight is that before we jump into the trends and best practices and use cases that we're seeing by specific verticals, which is the goal of this webinar, there's one thing that we want to highlight, and that's that effective communication really starts at the top. So regardless of vertical, the C-suite is taking it upon themselves to share news about COVID-19, what they're doing to help, what consumers can do to stay safe, and how they can help others. And this is really evoking this sense of corporate social responsibility, which has become top of mind for most consumers over the last few years. The structure that we're seeing is very similar across all these different messages. It's what's happening, what is the company doing, what can customers do, and all of that is really wrapped in this heartfelt message of assurance, so you need to make sure that you get that tone down right. These communications are now a requirement, so consumers expect to hear from each brand regardless of vertical. They want to hear what they're doing to contain the virus and how this could impact them individually. So with that, I think we're going to jump into the different verticals.
Yep, you are back to me with travel and hospitality. And Julio, I agree, the muting and unmuting has been throwing me off. So travel and hospitality, has been hit extremely hard. I think just from the survey results, we saw that we had the highest participation from this industry because I think the impact is really great as an immediate thing. So we did want to quickly showcase kind of what we're seeing from a strategy modification standpoint. As Julio mentioned, we are seeing the communications start top down across verticals. That includes travel and hospitality, from airlines to hotels to restaurants. But the 4 things that we're really seeing as people are doing or they're planning on doing as they modify their calendars are shifting to local staycation-esque marketing, showcasing safety protocols. So whether that's how often you wash your hands or the cleaning that you do in your room or the type of air filtering system that's on airplanes, we're continuing to see that as a peace of mind element for consumers. Modifying and educating customers on any changes to BAU policies. So cancellations have definitely changed over the last 2 weeks and even day in terms of allowing customers to book and have the freedom to change their plans down the road. This is leading to a little bit more of like an aspirational feel where maybe you want to go away in the summer and you would normally book it, but you're freaked out because you don't know where our society will be. This allows customers to continue with those plans and honestly have something nice to look forward to and hope that they can do it. And then finally, reassuring customers and educating them on what they're doing, which we covered in an earlier slide. So we did want to jump into some examples. So these 2 are really a shift to local staycation marketing. So as purchases are decreasing and consumers are veering away from planned trips, there's an opportunity for that local road trip ready kind of behavior. And I've even talked to friends and colleagues who are like, I need to just go to the woods for a while and get away from it all. So we do have an example in here from the Standard with the subject line near, not far, which was really great, highlighting that you can stay in your local area. And then we also have one from Travelocity about road tripping. Now, in these, you can target based on location with Movable Ink. If you have us in any of your emails today, you can also do it by zip code of where the person is today, or if you have an address on file, target based on that. Next is a little bit more detail on that opportunistic booking. So we do have 2 examples in here, one from United and one from JetBlue. United's really focusing on the flexibility that they're providing customers so that they can book now and change if they need to down the road, getting those dreamers. Whereas JetBlue took a little bit of a different approach, and they we're really focusing on working or studying remotely. As Allison mentioned, we're all working remotely now from our apartments. We're not using this as a vacation play, but the messaging is pulling on what's happening to everyone, but making it relevant and giving them those deals. And then I will call out, they do have the flexible call out in this email as well. So it's not just go work, you have that flexibility. Next, I do have a kind of white labeled incredible example here, but this is for anyone who might already have booked with you and you need to give updates as the situation changes. So this could be a standalone email or something that you start including in emails, but as the virus continues to spread, you may need to give updates on hours that you're open, if there's anything happening at the location they're going to, or just canceling that if that's what's available to them next. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we are seeing a lot of web pages go up for the most relevant information at that time. Again, we have 2 examples here that did really clear layouts just to let everyone know what's going on. It's very important that you can go there if you had a trip coming up to make sure that you're understanding what's happening. There's so much information out there right now and so many articles. I think it's really overwhelming for people. So as long as you can give that clear message from your organization, it's going to be helpful. So we're also seeing messages from companies regarding sick pay. I do have an example in here from Starbucks, but there have been others that have come out via social or through their web pages. This is really to help people who might be fearful of going to locations that have hourly paid employees that don't get sick pay, thinking that they would go to work regardless of if they felt ill or not. So organizations are really showcasing this to put the emphasis on their safety of their employees and their customers, and to help people feel like they can go in and do what they would normally do without the fear of being contaminated. And then finally, we're all aware that travel and hospitality is getting impacted greatly, with airlines and cruises canceling routes and even having to do temporary layoffs. There's a big impact here. Hotels and home sharing are both getting hit, from reservations to having to extend stays for people who might not be able to travel home and giving them discounted rates. Some of the home sharing sites are having their actual providers of those individuals who own the apartments or homes being fearful of being able to pay their mortgages because they're not getting the bookings either. So we know this is really big for this industry. Restaurants also are being hit. Some of the smaller ones in the highly impacted areas have already closed. So showcasing what you can do, making sure that you're there for them, and thinking about all of the 5 things we talked about early in this webinar, and really highlighting what your organization is doing to keep everyone safe is key. And with that, we're switching to retail. Again, there are questions that you can shoot over to us that we'll try to answer at the end of the session, but hopefully that was helpful on travel and hospitality.
Great. And I think for everybody on the line, even though we're bucketing these strategies and these trends that we're seeing by the verticals that each of us owns, they all really go hand in hand. So it's you'll see that you'll be able to take away things from retail, you'll be able to apply them to travel. It's all interconnected, because at the end of the day, it's all about how do we communicate in the right way with these customers while still trying to drive on our business goals. So hopefully you'll be able to take that away from the rest of the verticals that maybe you're not working in right now. Well, thanks, Al, for those insights also. I think it is apparent to everyone that travel and hospitality have been the most immediately impacted. And it does feel like the situation is changing minute by minute, with some big blows this week after Trump's European travel ban announcement. And who knows what's going to happen today. And what I take away from the travel and hospitality vertical is the need to be able to react quickly, so to adapt to this changing landscape, and that's something that's shared with retail. So with that, I want to jump into what we are seeing in the retail space. So let's see, I can click this over. There we go. So what we're seeing as best practices in retail is what I'm calling strategy amplification. So you'll notice that all 4 of these boxes have the word transparency in them. Retailers are relying on transparency and real-time information to foster these stronger relationships and trust with their customers during these difficult times. Many brands have already been implementing these strategies, but what we're seeing is that now they've really ramped up their use or are planning to do so soon. So we're going to talk about these in the next few slides, but the strategy amplification really refers to inventory transparency to address supply chain problems, price transparency to address all the price gouging that's going on, shipping transparency, given that packages are being increasingly delayed, and operations transparency, given that states and local governments are beginning to issue quarantine mandates and stores are closing. So what we're seeing, let me see if I can click over, sorry. What's going on? There we go. So COVID-19 is really wreaking havoc on the supply chain. Factories are being shut down, more and more workers are staying home, and even for finished goods, importing has been difficult due to inactive shipping fleets. Chinese manufacturing indices actually hit their lowest point since the Great Recession. And even once we're out of this, it's going to take time to re-up stock levels once the virus is controlled. And you can see in this communication from Staples that this is a key focus for retailers. They're messaging their customers to communicate that they're doing all they can to provide inventory transparency. So the supply chain and inventory are going to be the biggest focal point for retailers over the next few weeks. So as you may imagine, retailers will need to address COVID-19's impact on the supply chain with inventory transparency. And two things that retailers can do are highlighted in this section. And just a heads up, I've anonymized these examples to really hone in on the strategy and less focus on the branding. So many of our retail clients are already doing this, and we are in active conversations with others to accelerate launch. But first, retailers can provide live inventory updates to ensure that featured items are actually available for purchase. So the content blocks where they're showing their product grids are updating based on what is and is not available at the moment of open. The second strategy that we're seeing an uptick on is that retailers are providing back in stock updates. So by coupling that real-time inventory aspect with perhaps web browse behavior, they can surface items that are back in stock to individuals that search for them, or maybe items that are back in stock that are trending or are popular. And really, these strategies are providing the much-needed transparency into the state of inventory. Is something in stock? Is it not? Is it coming soon? The next trend is around price transparency. This is another impact that COVID-19 has had, which is the surge in demand of different products, and that's both online and in store. So the surge in demand has resulted in some merchants flooding online markets with overpriced goods, so actual price gouging, which is awful. But because of that, consumers are now very wary of price gouging. And because of that, now all retailers are going to have to respond to that, and they need to provide price transparency. So in this example, Thrive Market addressed this concern head on in their message, stating that they are committing to never engaging in surge pricing. So I love the fact that they went head on and addressed this, because consumers are really bothered by what's going on right now. So by including real-time pricing in their communications, retailers can provide that much-needed price transparency that the customers want. The prices in these dynamic modules are updating in real time at the moment of open, should they need to change. So even if you're fighting back on price gouging, pricing may need to change to some degree, and you want to make sure that's reflected in your communication, so this allows you to do that. And this live pricing can also be coupled with the live inventory example that we saw before to provide more information. And if you think about it, this strategy also serves to establish trust and build stronger relationships. The next trend is around shipping updates. So logistics have been significantly impacted by the coronavirus. FedEx and UPS have been warning of delivery delays, and it's difficult for them to predict the level of impact because this is a very fluid situation. And as we've heard, limitations on travel are holding up some shipments. So while I think consumers will initially understand the delays, they will want transparency on when to expect their products. And so we're hearing more clients talk about the use of real-time shipping trackers that provide transparency to the customer on where their packages are. And we're hearing more and more about these being included not just in transactional messages, but also in promo BAU ones as well. And the last major effect of the coronavirus has been the temporary closures of stores in areas that have been the hardest hit. The news we hear in Italy and in other places seem really far away, but that's likely to happen here soon, as scary as that may sound. So even if full closures are not enacted, there will be some changes. So for example, companies like Walmart are evaluating cutting back hours. And just last night, Glossier announced that it's closing down all of its retail locations in New York, LA, London, and Atlanta for at least the next 2 weeks. So this is going to cause further confusion for customers. So transparency into store operations will be very important. So because of this, we're seeing more uses of real-time updates on store hours and open locations. And so these maps and map helpers are providing necessary information as stores open and close. And right now, what I'm seeing is that this has been more of a preemptive use case, but clients are getting ready to communicate relevant information should operations be systemically disrupted in the US as they have been in other parts of the world. And to close, I want to share a couple of examples that I think, that in my opinion, are of brands that are doing things right. And in times like this, I think it's very easy to come off as tone deaf. So because of that, marketing message must take on a tone of subtlety. So Crate & Barrel has done a great job of capitalizing on the work from home trend. Many companies have asked their employees to work from home, ourselves included. And this message is timely, but still hits a delicate balance. We all understand that marketing messages can't stop, but you can execute your campaigns in a way that is not tone deaf to the situation. More importantly, as Ella mentioned before, you have to remember to make the customer feel like they're your number one priority. And L'Occitane did a great job of making sure that the customer is number one with this set of messages. In the first email, they started with Good News Hero, which really stands out in a sea of bad news. They've also provided real value to the customer by offering a place where the customer can come in and wash their hands whenever they need to. And then going back to the theme of subtlety, this also serves to bring the individual into the store. At this time, marketing done right means making the customer number one, being subtle, and providing real value and transparency. So I encourage all the brands on the line to take a good hard look at their marketing calendars to make sure that you're hitting on these key points.
Thanks, Julio. Those were some really great examples. I especially love that L'Occitane example. Okay, so now we're going to switch into media and technology. So as we've spoken about, we are really in a rapidly changing landscape, and we're seeing developments happen really by the hour. As countries limit public gatherings, we're seeing increased work from home policies, school closures, and event cancellations. Now, whilst media and technology can't solve for that, it can definitely lessen the impact and help us adapt to maintain a level of normality. So some of the key strategies that we're seeing within this space really address just that. In the streaming landscape, we're seeing heightened importance now more than ever on personalization and relevance. In news publishing, we're seeing a public duty really to share information. So we're seeing news outlets lift their paywalls to remove restrictions and keep the public informed. And as people shift to working from home, technology companies are really getting behind their commitment and support to support remote workforces. And then in addition to that, we're seeing the importance of real-time information share. And that's really being perpetuated in the gig economy as they pivot their policies and products to adapt to this ever-evolving environment. Okay. Starting with streaming, we're really expecting to see an uptick in consumption as people start to self-isolate. We have many people working from home, schools closing, which means there's more time spent in front of the TV. And speaking to our clients, they're really focusing their efforts on their personalization tactics to make sure that content delivered is constantly relevant to their consumers. And day-parting content is a really great way to achieve relevance. In this email example that I have up on the screen right now, if a consumer was to open that email in the morning, they could be presented with news-based content so that they could start their day in an informed manner. If they were to come back to that email, or let's say they were to engage with it in the afternoon and we knew they had children, we could update that content in real time to reflect afternoon programming that's relevant to children or educational even, now that we know that many schools are closing. And in the evening, we can really use streaming as a form of escape from everything that's going on right now. So promoting binge-worthy content could be a great way to really relieve some of the anxiety that people are feeling at the moment. And in an effort to prioritize public safety, we're seeing the cancellation of several mass gatherings. So that first started initially with tech and media conferences cancelling, and some of them shifting to virtual events. But it did start to escalate yesterday as we saw several major sporting leagues suspend their seasons. And late last night, we also saw several live leading entertainment forces band together to postpone large-scale events across the US for the remainder of March. And companies are responding to that in a really great way. They're providing up-to-date information on that, as well as offering really flexible cancellation policies and even providing rewards above purchase value to encourage rebooking at a safer time, which is really nice to see. So in an effort to keep the public informed, we're seeing an increasing number of news and media outlets removing their paywall restrictions. The New York Times is a really excellent example of this. They removed their paywall to facilitate freedom of information. So any information around the coronavirus is now free to access for the public. And on top of that, they've created a dedicated daily weekday newsletter on the coronavirus so that you have an up-to-date briefing in your inbox every weekday morning. In addition to that, we saw SiriusXM launch a free 24-hour, 7-day-a-week channel offering that offers round-the-clock information on the coronavirus, again, allowing for that facilitation of information share and constant updates as this situation develops. And in response to increased working from home policies, we've seen tech companies provide reassurance and clarity needed to move towards a remote working task force. They're really providing reassurance on how to work from home and move forward no matter where their customers may be. Microsoft and Google have taken that a step further in offering free access to their collaborative workforce tools. And in this email example from Microsoft, they provide an excellent example on their commitment to customers during this time, along with offering free access to their workspace tool Teams. In addition, in the module below, you can also see that they're offering free work from home support set up in store. So if you take your laptop or device in store, they'll help set you up to make sure you have what you need to work from home efficiently. And they've made that experience even easier by geo-targeting and providing information on your nearest store so that if you are interested in that benefit, you can take advantage of it very easily. Within the gig economy, we're also seeing the importance of real-time information. Organizations are working really closely with local health authorities to adjust their policies as this situation continues to develop. It's of high importance to make sure customers and workers are seeing the most up-to-date information to keep not only workers safe, but customers safe as the situation develops. And this is rapidly changing, and as are company policies. For example, Uber and Lyft most recently rolled out sick pay for 14 days if a driver falls ill to COVID-19. So really touching on that contingency pay that Elle spoke about earlier. In addition, we're seeing rapid product updates to help us adapt to this situation. So we've seen Instacart, Postmates, and DoorDash all now offer contactless delivery. And this means either in-app or through your delivery messaging section, you're able to provide guidance that you want your food dropped off at your door, so that you as a consumer now have the option to mitigate that physical touch and really limit your potential to spread the spread virus.
Great. So in this next section, I'll take you through a bit of what we're seeing across the financial services vertical. So to date, most of the messaging that we've seen across the vertical have largely been letters from leadership reassuring their customer bases and sort of letter format messages educating customers on the resources that their financial institution's making available to them. So some of this messaging includes, letters directly from company CEOs speaking to measures that they're taking, such as branch cleanings, business continuity plans, waived fees and penalties, and even credit line increases. And they've also included messages educating customers on digital and mobile banking. We are seeing companies start to work on a few key strategy shifts to offer more local rewards and offers versus travel-based ones, and driving more digital behavior. Diving into some of those specific strategic changes, we can expect to see an inclusion of more content that educates customers on digital account management. Companies are also beginning to keep a library of content for various markets and regions on hand in case they need to shift strategies based on impacts to that region. Also, companies are starting to provide tips based on region. So things like, for example, maybe suggesting that customers in a highly affected area preemptively take out cash in the event of a branch closure. And then lastly, we've seen some of this to date, and we'll continue to see messages educating customers on rate and fee changes. So bank branches are obviously, hugely impacted globally. We've seen branch closures across China and closures of schools and public institutions across the world. So to really make the experience of going to a physical location or a branch more convenient for customers, you can include real-time updates on branch hours and which branches are open. You could also include live maps, redirecting customers to open branches or showing open locations in case their usual local branch is closed. Given that supply chains have also been heavily impacted due to factory closures and delays in shipping, we can expect that there will be changes to rewards availability, specifically for travel, product, and merchandise rewards. So companies really need to be able to change rewards options real time depending on what's available. And they might need to quickly pivot to things like offering digital gift cards. And we've already seen some companies replace their travel-based rewards with other options. So an easy way to do this is to leverage a product inventory API so that at the time of open, only rewards options that are actually available at that moment can be shown. Staying on the topic of shipping, while most major shipping companies have said that they'll continue service to most areas, they've also advised that there could be growing delays. This means that, new customers who are waiting on their new credit or debit card, or customers who maybe ordered replacement cards recently, will want to know if the shipment of their card is delayed. So a way to do this and really help avoid driving up call volume and long call wait times is to provide a live status tracker of the card shipment. So up here you can see that we've showed the customer that their card package is at the NYC facility and is soon to be out for delivery, sort of easing that anxiousness on where their card might be. We've also already seen some institutions waive or change fees, and company policies will likely change on this, and they might vary depending on what location the customer's in. So an easy way to communicate this is to include a module that can update real time based on, say, the customer's address on file, their product, their live location in case they're traveling. So in this example up here, a banner is included at the top of the email, and it identifies that the customer is traveling and lets her know that ATM fees will be waived while she's traveling to XYZ city. Lastly, and we've seen this done in the past during emergency situations, financial institutions will often donate to nonprofits and emergency support groups, and they might also match donations made by their customers. They might also allow customers to transfer their rewards points to a charitable organization. So when we've seen this done in the past, something that really helps drive donations is to include an element of social proof and sort of community feel by doing something like showing a live counter of how many points or dollars other customers or the financial institution have already donated to encourage future donations. So hope you found that helpful. And with that, I will hand it back to Elle for this next section.
Yeah, so before we jump into Q&A, which if you do have a question, please write it in. We've seen a few come in, but we'll be tackling that right after this slide. So if you've got something burning on your mind, make sure you let us know. We did want to leave you with some information on the resources we use and what's available out there, just to make sure that you feel informed as the situation is quickly changing. So in terms of tracking what's happening from a crisis standpoint, we do recommend having somebody on your team, maybe multiple people, who are responsible monitoring different sites that are relevant for you. So on here, we do recommend the Center of Disease Control as well as the World Health Organization, or WHO. This will just be able to help you, especially if you're in travel or in FinServ, if things are changing based on vertical. Those posts will be included in there and you'll be able to see what's happening. In addition, Johns Hopkins University does have an interactive dashboard where you can see how the spread is progressing across the globe. This will be helpful as things, especially in the US, are starting to grow, just to see what areas might be highly impacted and if you need to shift anything happening in your marketing strategy. We also recommend, whether it's the same person or somebody else on your team, keeping up with some industry updates. So we do have key resources that we keep an eye on the regular. A great one is Skift, which actually put together a news feed just for the travel industry and how it's being impacted by the coronavirus. TechCrunch, MediaPost, eMarketer, and Forrester are all also great resources. And then finally, again, we're here for you. We view ourselves as an extension of your teams, and we would definitely want to work together through this difficult time. If you want to go into more detail on any of the topics we covered today or have additional questions that you want to ask us one-on-one, please reach out to your client experience team. Reach out to us directly if you know us or want to figure out our email addresses. Mine's ecross@movablelink.com. Again, feel free to reach out. We really do want to be here with you working through this as best we can. And with that, Kristen, am I handing it over to you for Q&A?
Yeah, I think Kristen and I are both going to jump in on moderating this. We've had some great questions so far, so thank you for all of that. Kristen, do you want to tee up the first one?
Sure. Okay, so this first question says, our struggle is not feeling tone deaf when communicating with folks in hospitals and healthcare. So how can we use our planned marketing but not seem out of touch when our customers are hospital execs who are on the front lines of this issue?
Wow.
Also, and another example, we have an event for hospital execs coming up in June. How can we ask people who are helping staff counter ventilators to register for a strategic event? So a couple of things at play here.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly tough. And we didn't cover B2B marketing, but certainly many of our clients are also B2B marketers. I actually saw this question come through, so I wrote a couple of notes. So my first thought is obviously the CEO outreach is got to be tantamount when it's B2B and you're dealing with more, higher ticket value business relationships and business contracts. Then I think there's a big opportunity because this is so specific. This is a health crisis, right? So you're dealing with healthcare providers. You have to really listen to the customers. And I think we've seen a lot of B2C brands listen to concerns in pop culture, whether it's on Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram about, sort of anxiety from consumers about presenteeism for employees at work, and that leading to policies that influence their paid sick leave and things like that. So how can you really ask and listen to your customers? And there's obviously channels like social. I know there are a lot of private groups on different social networks for healthcare professionals, but even just doing potentially a poll in the email where you're asking people, high level issues like, what level of risk assessment are you at right now? How is your facility responding? What is the thing that you need the most? I mean, today I just heard on the news, they're asking retired nurses and doctors to be in contact with the last institution that employed them and essentially like volunteer to be paid and re-up. So obviously very dire times. Also think it might be interesting to look at the analytics and see what that tells you. So if you do send out that poll, what time of day are you seeing people responding to these messages? How long are they lingering in the messages? And then the second piece going to kind of what everybody touched on, but Julio in particular, how can you focus on the part of your product or service and without knowing it, just sort of guessing like what's the most relevant to this situation, right? Are you a communication platform? Are you a risk mitigation platform? Are you something that's about patient outcomes? How can you, in an authentic way, without seeming too salesy, really double down on that? And I would do it in a way where it's really simple. I think you have to distill the message. And if it's not relevant to the situation, like say it's a payment tool, right? I would acknowledge that. I would say this is a very hectic time, but these hospitals are still businesses and going concerns, and they need to still operate as businesses. So how can you adjust? If you thought that you were going to have an hour-long demo, can you adjust it into videos that people can watch on their own schedule? You mentioned this conference. I would say, look, June, it's hard to know, but I would potentially involve your customers in deciding if you're going to have a virtual conference or not. maybe give them both the option and have that communication come from your CEO. And lastly, thinking about, could you optimize using the optimizer tool? Could you optimize the messaging and see what resonates the most? I don't know how big the lists are, but they don't need to be that big to reach statistical significance. And, can you then take that learning and iterate in real time? Anybody else have any questions on this? This is a really difficult situation, I think.
Great. So thank you, Allison. We have a lot of questions coming in, so please keep them coming. We do have a little bit of time. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at, it says, we are a subscription business within travel, and one of our biggest struggles is communications during this time frame. They can lead to cancellation. So we've started a webpage, and we're being very active on social regarding the steps that we're taking. But any thoughts on sending email communication updates if our members aren't traveling? And is it tone deaf to rely on web and social?
Yeah, so I can jump in on that one. I think it's two fronts, right? So to Allison's point, having something from the top come in, an email from your CEO or your CMO just about what your organization is doing will help your customers feel like you're thinking about them, right? It's not just whether or not they're traveling, but also they're a member of your subscription. So if you can do something like that to make them feel like you're there behind them, I think that's great. And in that, you could direct them to web if that's where you're updating information, or your social channels if that's where you feel a little bit more comfortable. Now, in line with what we were sharing about airlines and hotels and what they're moving towards, some people are still traveling, right? There have been many articles out there with younger millennials or people saying, if this is the time to travel, I'm going to do it. I want to go experience these things, and I actually get a discount for it. So while most people are being a little bit more home-based, there is that opportunity. So you do still want to communicate with those folks that are traveling, making sure that you're updating them on any cleaning or safety protocols that you're putting into place. But if your traditional methods of communication are web and social, you can continue to rely on those. I would do at least one communication to let them know that that's where they can find the most up-to-date information. And I don't know the rest of the team if anyone wants to jump in on that as well.
I thought that was great. And definitely there are a lot of people still traveling. And I've seen a lot of chatter on Twitter and Instagram about people saying, oh my God, you can make it to, London for like $200. You haven't seen those prices in like 15 years. And spring break is coming up, and I know a lot of families are deciding, as long as these are areas where there's not big outbreaks, and potentially if you do live in a place where there is an outbreak, as long as the flight routes are open and you can be cautious, people are giving it a shot.
Okay, thanks, guys. So we've got some more questions coming in. So this is a really interesting one. So it says, does the presence of a word like virus in subject lines or body copy potentially cause delivery issues like spam blocks?
Yeah, so I'll take that one, and I'll be fully transparent. That one's created a quick chat storm between this group here. So I'm going to give you my point of view on it. There's a number of factors that affect delivery. And I think as brands, we're all working towards making sure that we are not hitting spam traps and that our messages are making it into the inbox. What we're seeing is that a lot of these messages are coming from your marketing IP. So if you have already invested the time and resources to making sure that you're limiting traditional deliverability issues, then I don't think that this would cause further issues. But if you are sort of concerned around that, maybe instead of using the word virus, referencing the name of the virus as COVID-19, since I feel like everybody is very familiar that these two go hand in hand. And then if you're still sort of uncomfortable with that, I think another thing that you can do is quickly create a testing strategy. So just send one, 10% of your list, the subject line with virus, and then the rest something else, just to see if that affects your deliverability issues.
One other thing to mention on that is you can also throttle or flow rate those messages. And if you're working with, say, an ESP partner or a deliverability consultant, like a return path, have them monitor those messages as they go out so that if you do see deliverability spikes, you haven't, you're not overwhelmed with the volume and you can pause those messages.
Kristen, can I actually jump in? I had one that I wanted to pose to Elle before we ran out of time.
Absolutely. Go for it.
Awesome. Thank you. So Elle actually didn't toot her own horn, but she actually wrote the city communication that was in the examples that we shared earlier. And so I guess this is sort of a twofold question. One is like, Monday morning quarterbacking, if you look back, what are best practices to do as much as you possibly can before, the moment arrives? What does that really require? And then let's talk about now, the moment has arrived. You showed 5 best practices. People are in very fluid situations. Their businesses are being impacted. They're personally being impacted. What would be 1 or 2 things that they should do, like on Monday?
Yeah. So for the first question, the city email is an interesting one. We were not ready. We had a different crisis happen at a much smaller scale than what's happening today. Me and my team were tasked with coming up with a communication. It was one of those things where you're on the phone with one of your senior leaders at 1 a.m, finalizing what you think the right message is. And in that moment, it's a little bit harder to think clearly. So me and my team, and it was definitely a team effort, came together and said, all right, what are the 5 scenarios we think we should be ready for, and let's draft them and let's think about what might happen. And obviously some things have to change before they go out. It actually led to a huge project that took a long time to get through of like, what phone number are we going to use? Are we going to have a dedicated phone line? What treatments will we give customers depending on the products they have? So if you are a city customer, you may have received a different one depending on your range of products compared to the one that we shared on the screen, which was actually for Allison. So it did take a crisis moment for us to come up with that playbook. And basically what we did was sat down and said, for each of these situations, how would we want to be talked to? How would we want to hear from our organization? What would we want to know from them? And knowing what could happen, and it was all hypothetical, right? You hope none of these happens, but you want to be prepared for if they do. One of the biggest things that we recognized is to only communicate if we had something important to say, and that would help the customer base. So not just communicate to communicate, but give that really informational communication. And then for your second question, I know we have a minute left. It is very stressful for everyone right now. I would say start being prepared as much as you can now. We're in the middle of it. Look at your calendar, look a month out, look 6 months out, look a year out, because we don't know how things are going to rebound. And think about how you can be agile, what you need so that if a situation does arise that you need to respond to quickly, you're able to action on it, that you have the leadership that you need and the support that you need from your team to do that. I think
great.
That's right to the top of it.
Yeah, no,
awesome.
And to that end, just quickly, that's a nice plug. The client experience team is going to be reaching out next week to all of their clients to ask to run a risk management exercise that will basically look ahead for the next, I think, 90 days at least, to make sure that plans are in place for redundancy in a variety of scenarios. So please look forward to hearing from your client experience teams and running those brief exercises with them, ideally, by the end of next week. So everybody feels really prepared.
Great. Well, that just about brings us to time. So I want to once again thank Elle, Jackie, Julio, Naveen, and Allison for your insightful presentations today. And thank you to our audience today for being here and keeping with us. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.